we have a guest joining us this morning, Anne Whitmore, president of District Parent Advisory Committee here in Surrey. Anne, welcome.
Hello, thank you so much for having me.
Yeah. So, Anne, you have launched a website called a Room Clear Tracker. And you're doing this in partnership with or with support from the Surrey Teachers Association and QP 78. Can you tell us what this website is and why you saw the need for it?
Sure, and I just want to clarify that this is solely a Surrey District Parent Advisory Council project.
Okay.
Both of our unions are under restriction from the district about what they can say and making sure that they don't break privacy. And so we want to make sure that we don't get them in trouble.
But they are supporting it, are they?
We talked with them about this because we were hearing about the prevalence of, how often room clears were happening, and we wanted to understand better what was happening. And they stand with us in saying that this is a very important issue and that people need to know how often room clears are happening in schools.
So many people don't understand what room clear is. Can you explain that to us?
Yeah, so what happens is if there is maybe an unmet need and a child is dysregulated, they are going to express that in a number of different ways. And so at some point, there might be a point where the teacher feels that the room is unsafe. And so they will either take the entire class or part of the class to make more space in the room out of their classroom. With our schools being so crowded, sometimes there isn't even an open common space anymore to take the kids, so they might spread them out between other classes until the dysregulated child has been regulated and the room is safe again. The other thing that might happen is that maybe
Let me just ask for the sake of our listeners.
Yes.
So what you're saying is if a student is misbehaving in class, his behavior is out of control, I will say, then the teacher either takes the whole class out or takes part of the class outside until things get normalized.
So we do not look at that as misbehavior. We look at it as that kid is not being supported. They're not in an environment that works for them. And so they're communicating that with behavior. And so, yes, either the class or part of the class will be taken outside of their own classroom. Or what I was going to say is maybe the child is in a hallway or a common area and other students in the school will be kept inside.
So who will stay with the class and who will go with the kid when the kid is, who will go with the kids who are being asked to leave the class?
It really depends. It depends on the school. It depends on the day. It depends on who's available. So sometimes the education assistant, or in Surrey we call them IESW, will stay in the class or with the child, the dysregulated student. Sometimes it's a teacher. Sometimes they will call for extra support. So an administrator, like the principal, might come down. It just really depends on the situation and who is available.
So a
lot of classes actually don't have an education assistant in the room, and so they might need to call for an extra adult to come and help.
So can you give us a description of the kind of behaviors we're talking about?
Sure. Like it can be anything from, yelling and screaming and crying to an object being thrown or furniture being disrupted. There are any number of scenarios, but I think, the most important part that we want to highlight is that, safety for all is important, but most importantly, that the kid who needs support is getting it. And that's what we're trying to raise, is that how often is that not happening in our schools?
So will this tracker, a Room Clear tracker, only track these kind of incidences here in Surrey, or will it be tracking incidences like this across the province?
Yeah, so we started the project just to track Surrey, but we realized that because this is not being tracked, to our knowledge, anywhere in BC, we made it available, we put in an option to put other school districts, and we've been shocked that, almost half of the responses have been actually from outside of our district.
What, Anne, your group is a very hardworking group. I have known DPAC for a long, long time, and you
Yeah.
are passionate advocates for kids learning and
Yeah.
for public education. So, what made you or drove you to create this website? What were you hearing?
Yeah, so we were hearing about room clears, but more than that, we were hearing that supports for students in our district were lessening. So students who used to see the speech language pathologist are not seeing them. Students who need counseling support, it's a long wait to get in, or they don't get to see the counselor, or if they do, it's for 20 minutes every 2 or 3 weeks. We were hearing that students might have had an education assistant before, but there was no longer one available. Or if they had an EA, they were shared with 3, 4 other students. And so all of these things, often families feel like they're the only one that's experiencing this. And so then they go out and they advocate to their school, and then the school says, well, the district doesn't have a resource for us. So then they go to the district, and then the district says, well, we don't have enough money. So then they're supposed to go as one family to the Ministry of Education and say, hey, we need more money. But, when we don't fund inclusion properly, everybody in the classroom pays for that. And so what we really wanted to do was show, the minister yesterday said, well, never have we ever spent so much money, and Surrey gets $1 billion, and they just need to spend their money appropriately. And look, they had a surplus, so staff the classrooms. Families should not have to keep fighting for support for their kids when there's a known challenge that the child needs support, and they're already living sometimes a challenging life on the day-to-day basis. And so we want to make sure that there's equitable supports available for kids, and that inclusive education is funded properly. When we take students and we just put them in a classroom and expect the teacher to use universal design and make everything okay, we're seeing the toll on the mental health and the physical health of our educators. And we're seeing, with our kids, the impact of being in an environment that just doesn't support them properly.
And I want to say that inclusion, when it is properly funded and appropriately implemented, is amazing, marvelous, and necessary. But when
Perfect.
kids are put into classrooms and the resources are not there to support the needs that they have, then you are warehousing them, and you're doing a disservice to every child in that classroom. So for
I,
me,
I, mhm.
I have a question of you. When you hear any minister of education, and I don't care about the political stripe, I'm talking
Mhm.
about a minister of education saying, we give you money, deal with it. How do you feel as a parent?
And first of all, what you said was beautifully said, and thank you for articulating it that way, because I think you're absolutely right.
Just so
And
you know,
when
I was a great advocate for responsible inclusion, not full inclusion, but responsible inclusion with resources, because anything less is doing huge harm to all kids in the school system.
Yes. And so, as a parent and as an advocate, and I know that I know my experience is shared by others. It's incredibly frustrating, and also I think it says to me that those in charge do not understand what inclusion actually means. We give lip service to inclusion because that's the way that the way of the world, most of the world now.
To
Um,
speak
but
against it is to get a target on yourself.
of course. But here's the thing, inclusion doesn't look the same for everybody. So when we no longer have extra spaces in the school where there's a quiet area, where there's a sensory room, where there's a pull-out space, where there's adequate counseling rooms that's quiet. Like in my school, the counseling room is a small office that used to be the librarian's office off of the music room. How do you do counseling when music is happening on the other side of the door? So when we no longer have those spaces and the people available to support kids, it's incredibly frustrating as a parent and a caregiver, because the response back is a wall. Like, yeah, it's hard, but what can we do? We don't have the money. And how am I, as one individual, going to shake the tree at the Treasury to unleash funds to support our kids? But when we don't do it now, when we do not fund it now, we will pay. We know as a society we will pay. We will pay in people not being adequately equipped to go out to the workplace and have a fulfilling job, to be contributors to society. We miss out on their brilliance. And then, the darker side is that we pay in mental health supports, we pay in substance use supports, we pay in corrections. And so, I know it sounds alarmist, but when we talk about children as our most precious resource, and then we say, sorry, just don't have the money, like, we will pay. We know we will pay. We either pay now or we will pay later.
Let me ask a question. There are some kids, I know you don't want to talk about behavior. There are some kids who have such severe behavior needs that there is a category. And there was a time when those severe behavior kids were in classrooms of no more than 7, and with lots of help in that room. But now many of those kids are in the classrooms without much support, and if any support, maybe an hour. My question to you is, does Surrey still have a distinct severe behavior program in their schools?
Surrey has several different programs, I think it's best that you speak to the district about those, because I actually I'm not aware of all of them. And so there are behavioral programs that are housed within schools. And there are also, different specialty programs. But, I spoke with an education assistant, like a career education assistant, a couple days ago, and they were saying, when I started this career, I was always one-to-one. And if I wasn't, one person supporting one student, I was afloat, which meant that I was a spare person. I think we would be hard pressed to find in most schools any spare EA, and many of them are floating between different classrooms, covering different, morning with one student, afternoon with another student, so the students are not necessarily getting bell-to-bell support. To your point of what you're saying, there are some students where being in a school all day is extremely difficult for them. And I think it's the students and their families that need to make that decision about what's appropriate. But unfortunately, there aren't very many other options for them. And so, again, when we talk about inclusion doesn't look the same for everybody. However, where the ombudsperson's report is looking at exclusion, there are families where they are told your child can only come from 9 to 10:30 every single day. And for their entire school career, and they might be in 5th, 6th, 7th grade or higher, they have never spent a full day in school. So
Anne, there is so much we could talk about here, and we could probably take the whole day, because this area fascinates me as well. But we will have you back a different time. But I am interested in following this website to see what you gather, a room clear tracker. And just for our listeners, that is when a teacher has to either remove the whole class or when part of the class has to leave so that the teacher can focus on regulating the behavior of a specific child. So, Anne, thank you so much for being our guest this morning, and look forward to having you back on this issue again.
My pleasure. Anytime. Thank you so much.